Pretty, very pretty.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, the Idris, the greatest weapon against humanity. I mean, anyways, that's actually at the end, and there's not enough in this presentation to actually get into how the Idris was used precisely. But anyway, so what this is going to go through the beginning and the early middle of Aegis dynamics. So this segment is titled kind of two different things. Tree came up with his own thing, and I forgot what you named it. Are they heroes or criminals? I think it was something like that.
Oh yeah, war heroes or war criminals.
War heroes or war criminals? The answer is yes. I named it Aegis Who because it's going to be a long running series. I'm going to be going through all the different manufacturers, starting with Aegis because, like I said in the opener, somebody asked me why is Aegis evil. How do you pronounce Aegis? Well, you can pronounce it Aegis, 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 or Urgis. Basically, how Star Citizen deals with pronunciation is if you can pronounce it, you're correct. Somebody somewhere has pronounced it. How are you pronouncing it in lore somewhere? Because lots of planets, lots of different dialects. You go for it. Anyway, Aegis grew to prominence as a manufacturer of military spacecrafts during the First Terran War. Formed by Ivar Messer. Actually, that is incorrect. I have two starts here. Not formed by Ivar Messer, but he had a good hand in actually bringing them into public consciousness. They built orbital bombers, grew to public prominence after their infamous victory on Idris 4. When he ascended to become the Imperator, or first Imperator, Ivar Messer contracted Aegis as the UEE's primary source of military-grade spacecraft and defenses. During the Messer era, Aegis craft became synonymous with the ruthless, oppressive regime. So that's just the intro. Now we get into the nitty-gritty. Aegis was founded in 2532 on Cestulus Davian II as a merger between the Earth-based Aegis macrocomputing and Davian-based dynamic production systems. The former constructed computing systems for the burgeoning spacecraft industry, and the latter maintained 4 systems worth of production yards, including the specialized components factories on their home system. The goal from day one for these companies was to build naval spacecraft, and resulting company was tailor-made for spacecraft construction or contract bidding in an era when mankind was marshaling its forces. Just 9 years later, on 2541, the Tavarn War first broke out, or the first Tavarn War broke out. Now that this is just the event that Aegis Dynamics was made for, and in 2544, just 3 years after that, the first spacecraft, the Retaliator, rolled off the production line. This is the first one we know about, and right onto the front lines. Consequently, on October 1st, 2544, the Battle of Idris 4 happened. This is the event for both Idris and the Messers. The Aegis Retaliator taking a decisive role in another victory for the UPE and for Ivar Messer. After that, the destiny between Aegis and the Messers were tied. The only remaining original Retaliator, assembled in 2567 and no longer flyable, is serviced serviced by the 58th Squadron reenactment cohort. I can read on the grounds of the Mohio. There we go. I can speak words. Museum. I tried practicing that word. That one's actually really hard. It's New Zealand, by the way, is where I forget the kind of language it is, but the people from New Zealand, that's what the language they speak. After the victory of Idris 4, the Retaliator became a symbol of the Navy, and Ivar the face of the war. The next year, the initial specifications of the ship that would later become the Idris frigate, named after the Battle of Idris, was established by the United Planets Earth. So we are still pre-UEE. This is what is the United Planets of Earth. That is a big deal, and it will come back to us later. And by the Weapon Development Bureau, or WEPDEV. The frigate was part of a range of forward-thinking plans that attempted to imagine the form that Earth's military would need to take after the successful conclusion of the then-raging First Tavarn War. In 2549, the first prototype of the ship began its space trials, and after 3 years of development, pledged with typical bureaucracy confusion to outside observers, the ship was completed. The ship was completely different from the initial specification of a corvette, now a massive frigate spacecraft, massing several times the original proposal, mounting an enormous railgun, and carrying a fully functional space deck capable of supporting multiple chassis of fighters and bombers. With the design specifications being revised multiple times as the reality of the post-war empire became increasingly clear. Messer-aligned planners quickly identified the project as important to establish their own power base, and they worked carefully with Aegis and their other contractors. So basically, as the Messers took more power, they had differing things they needed from their ships, and so they made Aegis build the ship closer to what they need. What were the Messers' plans? We'll get into that again very soon later. I'm going through this way faster, so this is actually going to be quite a short thing, because I talk too fast when presenting. It's fine. In 2546, Ivar was elected prime citizen after some shenanigans with terrorists. He went on to, and this is not about the Messers, this is about Aegis. When he went on to completely restructure the government, first dissolving the tribunal, made up of a high secretary responsible for infrastructure, high command, a three-person position responsible for managing each branch of the military, and a high advocate responsible for law enforcement. This is all the while bringing along his friends, Aegis Dynamics, to build ships. Why would a prime citizen that now owns the government need ships? Then renaming the UPE the United Empire of Earth, and then declaring himself emperor in early 2547. In 2551, the first and the lead ship of the Idris frigate, the UNE Idris, was commissioned in a ceremony at Aegis' newly constructed Idris System factory complex. The launch was attended by Ivar Messer, who presented a famous speech seen today as a prelude to him taking increased control of the UEE in the name of public safety. I feel like I've heard this song before. The initial factory constructed by Idris to produce the ships included 6 berths that would work around the clock. The first 6 Idrises laid down were all commissioned by Ivar Messer in May 2552 and began service tryouts, then extended patrol assignments later that year. So they are able to produce, out of these 6 berths, 6 Idrises a year. It takes the current U.S. military 4 years to make a single frigate. They moved fast. They had the backing of the government and the emperor, or imperator. Sorry, my bad. In 2555, first Flight 2 Idrises were launched. With the early issues resolved, Idris production continued at a pace, and powerful frigates quickly became a common sight around the empire. So these were no longer just used for patrol missions and for special events. This was everywhere. They were everywhere. Moving past the Idris, though, the Gladius development began in 2573, so just a couple of years later, as a replacement for the obsolete Elihu Harmon Stiletto Interceptor, which suffered from an inability to adapt to more modern shield components and faced increasing supply chain issues following the Elihu Harmon aerospace bankruptcy. The Gladius was created for service aboard smaller cattle ships like the Idris that weren't outfitted for full-scale aerospace operations. It was also the first ship to introduce a civilian-style modularity into fighter design. This allowed the Gladius to be quickly upgraded or outfitted for other missions without requiring longer stay in the hangar for retrofit. The Gladius saw wide adoption upon the rollout in 2579. Now, we're going to take a detour for the rest of this little bit to talk about some of the things that the Messers used these ships for. In 2587, a band of outlaws were hunted down, leading to the discovery of the OES system. When the officer actually found them, he observed that they were just trying to live outside of the Messers' empire. though stealing from passenger freighters. But when he reported his findings, they were not taken into custody, as most unlawful citizens are. They were told to get rid of them, and in the words of the officer, they wiped them out. They wiped out the inhabitants, caught them as they tried to flee the system. So they weren't just hunted down and removed and like dead or alive kind of thing. They chased them. They chased them in space, and what do you think they used? Aegis ships. Between 2603 and 2610, the Second Tavaran War was waged, resulting in the Tavaran leaving their culture and history and what is known now as the Purge and integrated into the UEE. Some still live outside the UEE, some live in their own kind of cultures in little pockets. This has a lot of bearing on some current events that are happening in the game. But needless to say, they kind of wiped the floor with them the second time. In 2638, the senator of Terra, Sen Kareen, proposed a plan for Terra to gain sovereignty from the UEE. What followed was nothing less than a complete annihilation of his life and reputation at the hands of Livia Messer III. They did everything up to killing him. We currently don't know his whereabouts, so it's possible that he was taken to a black site, assuming that he was actually captured. Though not directly Aegis, these events are a sampling of what the Messers and their favorite ships have done across the Empire. That's all for now, for this episode, for this kind of part one. There's a lot that we gloss over, and there's a lot that's not really substantiated. And I wanted to make sure that there wasn't a ton, it wasn't just the ship history of everything. So, on the next one, this is we'll go into the height of the Messer era and the downfall of Aegis. As this and part 2 will be posted on the NovaForge YouTube channel. Now, I'm sorry, Tree, that I made that in like 10 minutes.
Dude, don't worry about it.
I spent literally all day compiling that.
It's good because like this is the beginning of a big project. You know, well, this is the beginning of one part of a really big project. You know, and here let's where did your let's close this and pull that back up. Because this is the timeline you're working on, and like it has all these little things. You know, when it comes to the tools that people are creating in the community for Star Citizen, you know, this is visually, you know, for me, especially being a lore geek, is fantastic. You know, because you can scroll through here and you can see the years. And then you can see all these little, I guess what would you call them? Little points.
Events.
Yeah, little events, you know, on the timeline in reference to the years, and they're color coded, straight out of a box of crayons. It's like somebody took a crayon and said, "This crayon means this," you know, and there's an event for something engineering, you know, or alien races, you know, and so. I mean, yeah, there's a ton of stuff to put in there, obviously, but there's already a ton of stuff in here. A lot of really great information, you know, and as you continue to make updates and stuff, you know, especially like I think one thing would be, you know, how they do the Galactopedia update. If you could, you don't have to make links or anything like that, but if you like made a list of, hey, here's all the things I added to it this month. You know, and you could do that when on one of your shows when you stream, be like, hey, I added all these different articles and here are the links and stuff. And, you know, I think it would get a lot of viewer traction to what you're working on, you know, which also brings you feedback, you know, and input. But, you know, the Galactopedia is great, but the Galactopedia is just here's all the information. You search for it by name or category. There's no organizing it, you know, by time. And you know the I don't know how to put it, but the putting things in the frame of reference of when they occurred is like super important context, and having it visually makes it a lot easier for people to process how these things, how different events relate to other events, versus just, oh, okay, I read about this event and then I read about a similar event, but you don't really, you see the year, but you don't really process it in a
Hmm.
way when you're going back and forth between like Galactopedia articles or
Yeah.
something on the wiki.
Yeah,
So
that is an excellent idea. So I've actually added a channel to my Discord. Star Citizen Ultimate Timeline news and updates.
bingo. I am
So that is
going
where I'll
to.
post just like the Galactopedia does its updates. The plan is right now, the first thought I have is to make sure I have the links to every article I add, as well as a just list of all the events that I've added.
I will make a thing so that my Discord follows those updates
All right.
in Star Citizen news, because
Whew.
I think it's good stuff.
I should probably compile a document in like the no free time that I have, of everything that's on there, so I can do like a version 0.
Let's see. How do I